Hey guys, I know I haven't made a video in a long time, and I don't really make them anymore. I just don't enjoy it that much because it's just, I don't know, there's a lot of things that go on YouTube and that go on I don't want to be involved in anymore. But anyway, but I did want to come on today because it is Halloween, and I'm just laying here now, resting a little bit. I'm tired. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go on and just tell a little bit of a Halloween story to people. So, now, first of all, I want to preface this with saying I am a Christian, and everybody that follows me for very long knows this. I don't believe in ghosts at all. I don't believe that when we die, we stay around here and hang around for any reason. If that was true, with all the people that have been on this earth and gone, we'd see ghosts everywhere. But anyway, I don't believe in ghosts. However, I do believe in paranormal, which means I know that there's things we can't explain. I know there's strange things that happen all the time. We don't have any explanation for. Um, but I don't believe it has to do with humans in any shape, form, or fashion. Now, I want to tell you first this quick story before I get to my story. My story's real short, but I want to tell you this part. When I got married, I was 19, and I went to work at this hospital where my husband worked, and his mom, she was a secretary to the head of nursing, and his brother worked there, and so I was working there too. And at that time, I started in the ER. And back then, this is like 1973. I was an admissions, well, not admissions, but in the ER when they came in, I would be typing them up, and then I would go back after typing them up and help the nurse and doctor with whatever they need. Because it was just nights. I worked 11 to 7. And so I would just, go back there and help them with whatever they needed, and then I would go back to my desk and do whatever paperwork I had to do. But this hospital that I worked in, now you had to, back then when I was hired, I had to go to 2 weeks of orientation and kind of learning about nursing as a nurse's aide. So their classrooms was on the 5th floor. Now, I'm going to tell you about the 5th floor. And now this is back, the hospital was, it's not there. That part of the hospital is not there. They ended up moving, building onto the back of the hospital. And while they were building, we still were working in the old hospital until each section was ready to go over to the new hospital. So anyway, there was this is a true story, you guys. I'm not making this up. You can go online. You can find this information. It's true. The name of the hospital was Alexian Brothers. And it was an old hospital. And I remember when I was little, and if we drove past it, I always wondered why they had bars on the windows on one of the floors. I just always thought that was weird. But anyway, once I started working there and we had to go to the 5th floor for our classes, that was the floor that had all the bars on the windows. Well, the reason the bars was on the windows is because at that time it was a psychiatric area floor. So that's where they put all their psychiatric patients. So, but the time I'm going to go back to is even further back to like the 1940s, I think it was. And there was a young boy that was growing up in, I want to say, Idaho or Iowa, Ohio, somewhere like that. And he lived with his mom and his grandmother. Well, him and his grandmother were close and stuff now. They were Lutheran, which I am. So, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. But anyway, they were playing with Ouija board one time, him and his grandma. And then after that, things started happening with this boy. And at first it started like with scratching on the walls, and even the mom and the grandmother could hear this. But then the boy started getting really bad. And he had words come up on his stomach, and Lutherans don't believe in doing exorcisms and stuff like that. But the pastor, when this boy was going through all this, and he knew that something wasn't right, he had them go see this priest friend of his. So the boy went, and the priest came and seen him at the house and wasn't able to help the little boy. So he had called another priest in St. Louis and asked him if he was a cardinal, and they asked him if they could please take him. And there was a hospital there, St. Louis University, and they taught. That's where they. It was also a school for like doctors and stuff to learn and stuff. But anyway, they took him in there, and the priest, tried figuring out what was going on. They spent time with him, prayed, did all that kind of stuff. And then they decided they wanted to take and have him put in this hospital that I worked in, which was Alexian Brothers. And so, excuse me, guys, I'm sorry. And so the brothers took him in there, and he was up on this 5th floor. I got to take a drink real quick, guys. I'm sorry, I just don't want to cough constantly. So they took him to the Alexian Brothers, and they put him in this room on the 5th floor. Well, I don't know anything about it. And even when I first started working there, I didn't know. I did know about the story, come to think of it, but the brothers never talked about it. So it wasn't something like that was talked about. But I did know about it because I remember that we had our classes on the 5th floor. Now, you guys got to remember, this is in 73, so bear with me. I'm so sorry. Bear with me on my storytelling, okay? But anyway, it was really weird because it was one of those elevators when we went up there, and this was only an elevator for the 5th floor. And it was one of those where you had to pull that, like, grated door, and it had, like, you had to pull 2 doors to close it anyway. So I was going there for my classes before I started my job. Well, my job was going to be in the emergency room, and after I typed the patients up, which was my job, and then I'd go into the emergency room, because this is back in 73, and those things that we could do back then that no way would they allow you to do today as a nurse's aide. But I went back there and would assist the doctor and the nurse, and then go back to my desk and do whatever paperwork I had to do. But I was always afraid of that hospital. I don't know why, but I was. But I didn't mind the ER because it was on the 1st floor, and it was right as you come into the door. So I didn't feel like I was really in the hospital. But a couple of times I'd get pulled up to the floors and have to work up there if they were shorthanded, and I hated it. I was so scared to go. And they didn't have lights in the rooms like they do now over the beds. And or if they did, they didn't have them on. It was dark. And so at night, we'd have to go in and first thing make rounds and just check the rooms and check the patients. Well, I just was too afraid. All I would do is take my flashlight, go by the door, and just roll it on the floor to see that the patient hadn't fallen out of bed or anything. I didn't check the patients. I just couldn't. So anyway, that was that part. But anyway, so what had happened is they took this boy in, and the brothers were up there, and they prayed and did all their exorcism things, whatever that involved. And eventually the boy was cured of whatever it was. But there was a brother that always kept notes, kept a book, and wrote everything down in. And of course, after that boy left, they locked that room up and just used it like a storage, but nobody really went in there anymore. And so when it came time that they were going to start tearing down building the hospital in the back, and they started getting rid of some of the stuff and taking it over to the new hospital behind this hospital. And somehow or another, and this I don't know, I can't tell you exactly how, but somehow or another, the book was found of the brother that had written all this stuff down. And somehow, and I don't know this either, but you guys can look it up. It's regular knowledge, but my brain is not real good remembering that stuff. But somehow the diary got uh, given or sold to or something to William Peter Blatty that did The Exorcist. Now, of course, that was exaggerated, but the part about the writing on the stomach and all that was true. And once the movie come out and it started coming out about Alexian Brothers, the brothers kind of started opening up a little bit about stuff. And I had a brother that worked at nights, and he was the same one all the time. His name was Brother Albert, and he was real tall. He had white hair, and he always wore this long white um, priest flock. Anyway, really nice guy. And so he kind of would talk a little bit more. And my husband knew more of the brothers than I did. And he had been there a lot longer than me because he started working there when he was 16. So he knew the brothers and everything better than I did. And of course, his mom worked there, and they were just like more of a family unit, I guess. And so he talked to some of the other brothers and stuff about what had happened. But they didn't really go into a whole lot of it, but we knew what happened. We knew he was on the 5th floor, and at that time it was just all geriatric males that were in that hospital as patients. When I was working there, it was a regular hospital, and it had men, women, children, everything there. So my point to that was that hospital was really weird. And I remember this. When they were building the after they got the first part built, we literally carried the stuff from the old ER over to the new ER, and we'd put stuff on wheelchairs or gurneys or whatever and push it over to the new one. And as it was getting closer and closer to closing down the front part, and they started to start tearing it down, they had one of those wrecking balls, and so they went to hit the building where that window was, where the window of the boy was, and it missed and went into the new snack shop in the new building. Somehow the ball didn't hit the right building, went back over and hit the snack shop. And so, I mean, just a lot of weird things that were going on during that period there. And now when I think of crazy stuff like that, I don't think of human ghost. I think more of some entity type thing, bad things. But anyway, so then years later, we moved to Arkansas, and I lived in Jonesboro, and I started working at the hospital there, and I really, really loved it there. And I worked in the ER at this time. By the time I left there, had been through many jobs. But anyway, I started in the ER as a secretary. As people came in, I would register them and all that stuff. And then they would go back to the nurse or whatever, or sit in the waiting room. But anyway, I worked at 7 in the evening till 7 in the morning, and there wasn't many patients this night. And so the security guard was walking by, and he would stop every once in a while if it was quiet and just sit and talk to me for a little bit. Well, this night it was really quiet. I mean, really quiet. So he come by and was sitting talking to me, and he started telling me stories about this strange thing that had happened to him to do with this watch, and how they were moving someplace, him and his family, and he had this watch, and he remembers that when they were moving, before they left, he just couldn't find his watch. He looked everywhere for this watch. And so he just was like, I don't know what happened to it. I've looked everywhere. Well, when they moved to the new house, he said they found this watch outside on the ground, and it was his watch. And so, he was like, they just couldn't figure out how this watch got there, because there was just no way, because he had the watch on just a day or so before they moved, and then it was just gone. They hadn't been out there. So anyway, it was real quiet. And if you opened the door behind where I sat, you were in where the nurses and the doctor was. And so if it was real quiet, a lot of times I'd just open the door and leave it open and sit back and talk with them and, you know, uh, keep an eye out in case somebody came in. Well, this night, like I said, it was really quiet. So I was just sitting back there and we were talking. And the security guard come walking by and I said, hey, come here. I think his name was James. I said, James, come here, come here. Tell them guys the story you told me, because he did it real elaborate and I wanted him to tell them the story. And so he did and everything. And then the nurses started talking about, things that had happened in the hospital or, and how that, they always claim no matter where your hospital you're in, there's always a hospital ghost. And I just said to them all, I said, that's just crazy, because how many people die in this hospital? That would just be crazy to say, oh, we got one ghost. And I said, and right across the hall from where we sat from the nurses station was the room where we had like the whole cardiac set up. So when patients come in with chest pain or anything like that, any kind of problems, they went in there so that if they needed to, go into the whole resuscitation cardiac type thing and had to shock patients, that was all in that room, which was right across the hall from us. So we're sitting there and I'm like, you guys, I said, how many patients have died in this hospital? Why do you think there's a ghost? And I said, that's like saying because that room there has had many people die in it, there would be a ghost. And just as I said this, and this is the honest truth, the light went off and then went on in that room. And that security guard just looked at me like, I don't know what he thought, but he just looked at me and he goes, he left. He said he's got to go. And he went to his office. And everybody in there was like just shocked that happened, because it never happened before. There's never been a light flickering there in any of the rooms, let alone that room. And so we were kind of laughing at it and stuff, and I didn't think much of it. I just thought, wow, that's a coincidence, But evidently the people there didn't think it was such a coincidence. And so the security guard never talked to me again, wouldn't even come talk to me, wanted nothing to do with me. And I thought, what did I do? And so then the doctor that worked with me that night said after that, every time we'd work together, he'd say something like, we'd all get talking, and he'd look at me and goes, but we're okay, right? And I was like, yeah. So then years later, after I left that hospital, I ran into one of the nurses. And this was years after I left that hospital. And the one thing she said she remembered was that day that we were all sitting there and that light did that. And I was just sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, do they think I'm some type of a freak or something? I don't know. But it did happen. And it was just a freak of act. I don't know, just a crazy thing that happened. But it just cracked me up that she remembered that so many years later. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about there are paranormal things that just are not normal, everyday things. But I don't believe in ghosts. But I just wanted to share that story and a little bit about, I grew up in St. Louis, and I grew up in an area that was very historical. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Lemp Mansion or the Demonell Mansion. That was all right by me. I lived right there by the Cherokee Caves, and this is at the time back when they had an underground passage from like the Lemp Mansion and all that to the brewery. So they had all these caves, and I lived right by Anheuser-Busch. It was just very historical. And there's so many of these stories I could go on about, but we'll save it for another day, maybe. I don't know. But I just wanted to share that with you on Halloween, and just hope you enjoyed it. And I will talk to you guys soon. Bye, guys.